Well, it's 3 o'clock. I think that we will get started. So we just want to thank you all for joining us for the 2021 Virtual Southern Home and Garden Show virtual presentation. Our last presentation today is going to be basic landscape design. And we want to thank our sponsors of the 2021 Home and Garden Show, which is the Pulaski Lions Club, Bankston Motorhome, Big Creek Winery, Bull on the Run, Farm Bureau Insurance, Five Stones Landscape, Tri-Green Equipment, Giles County Co-op, Pilot Maintenance, Blue Line Pressure Washing Services, Pulaski Electric System, Haney Realty and Property Management, the Giles County Chamber, and UTTSU Extension. We hope that you'll go and visit our vendors this year. We have All-American Gutter Protection, Aspen Hill Growers, Butcher Drafting Services, Flower Creamery, Leaf Guard, Georgia's Quilts, Columbia Kubota, Kathy G Creations, Guardian Garage Floors, and Lane Roofing Company. You can check us out at our website, which is the Southern Home and Garden Show. You can also find us on Facebook at the Pulaski Lions Club Southern Lawn Garden and Home Show. We are also on Twitter and Instagram, so please check us out. So today we are talking about basic landscape design. My name is Darby Allday. And this presentation must be given credit to Carol Reese. I took most of the pictures and kind of her concepts and put it into this presentation for today. So most of the pictures that we see are ones that Carol had in another presentation about landscape design. So we're going to talk about the 5 elements of landscape design, and they are line, form, color, texture, and scale. And these are going to be used in combination with the principles of proportion, order or balance, repetition of not just the plants, but of colors and textures and hardscapes, and unity, which is just bringing all of your spaces together instead of sounding like an out of tune instrument that's just kind of all over the place and you're like, what happened here? But we're going to focus on the 5 elements and not as much on the principles of this. So the first thing that you need to do is ask, what is it about? Is landscape design all about the plants? Carol Reese says that it should be about defining the outdoor spaces that are used or that are created with the user's need and preferences in mind. It should be made for the person that's going to use it. Not everybody wants cookie box landscaping. You know, it needs to fit their own personalities. Everybody is different. If you look at this picture, there's not a single person that looks exactly the same. They may have some things that they do the same, but there are other things that probably are not. So when you think of your landscape, it should be your landscape, not Jane Doe's or John Doe's. It should be yours. And so it's different strokes for different folks. So when you think about your landscape design, you should think about it like building a home. You are building a personalized landscape. So the first thing that you're going to do is when you're building anything, you need to come up with a floor plan. This is where you assess what you need, what you want. You know, when you dream of it, what do you see? And then you need to define the spaces that meet those needs. Where in your yard Can you do that? And then find those spaces. And then you need to reconcile the site realities. You've got to be realistic about the drainage of your soil, how much space you have, your slope of your land, what kind of soils you have, what kind of climate do you have in your space, what kind of sunlight do you have. And then the first thing that you need to do is you need to install your hardscapes. These are going to be your structures, your patios, your walks, your parking, your fences, whatever is going to be kind of pretty much a permanent fixture in this landscape. That's going to be the first thing that you put down. This is your foundation. And then you're going to come in and you're going to find some mainstay plants that help you to reach your design goals. So these are the ones that, you know, when you put them in, you're like, they're going to be in there for the long haul, or as close to the long haul as possible. And then you're going to decorate with color, texture, form, and seasonal interest. This is where you get to put your personality into your landscape. This is where you get to decorate your home or your living space, because it really is your outdoor living space. So we're going to look at some pictures here, and we're going to ask questions about what you want and what you need. So are you a person that wants to garden? Do you want to have a garden in the ground, or do you want to have raised beds? What kind of garden do you want? Do you have pets? Do you have cats? Do you have dogs? What kind of space do they need? Do you have kids and pets that need a lot of lawn to run on, to play? Are you interested in bird watching? Do you want to draw the birds in? Is that what your landscape is going to be for, so that you can watch the birds? Maybe you want to build a butterfly garden because they're so beautiful, and some of them are really needing some help. Or maybe you want to build a pollinator garden, or you just want to leave your garden out there for whatever wants to grow, and whatever wants to eat your leaves, to eat your leaves. Maybe you want a place where you can just hang out. Maybe you want to have some backyard chickens. Maybe you want to have a cut flower garden. Maybe you want to make your own arrangements that you can bring the outside in to give that pop of color. Maybe you want to make some wreaths and some ornaments and some design from the trees that you have. Maybe you like to cook outdoors. Maybe you need a place where you can grill. Maybe you need a really fancy place to go outside and to grill, you know, where you've got a refrigerator, you've got a sink, you've got a place for other people to kind of hang out. You've got a nice grill there that's under a cover that you really enjoy. Maybe you need a place for you to be able to entertain all of your friends and family. Maybe you need a place where the whole family can come and have sack races or other type things that they want to have in the landscape. You know, I come from a big family, and so this would be a great thing for us to have, is, you know, a place for all of our kids to go out there and to play. And maybe if we're dreaming big, we're dreaming of the place where we can walk along the fence and we can pet our horses as they put their noses over the fence looking for that rub. And if we're truly dreaming big, wouldn't it be awesome to have a pond in your backyard? So what are you dreaming of? Once you kind of figure out what you're kind of dreaming of, now you need to figure out, what is your style? Is it rustic and simple? Or maybe it's more traditional and southern? Or maybe it's a cottage style that's very colorful? Or maybe it's minimalistic? Maybe it's artsy and eclectic and bold. Or maybe it's more industrial and masculine and austere in appearance. Which style fits you? If you were going to decorate your inside, which one would you pick? You could go Carol Reese style, which is the style that is clean with a leaf blower. She said she designed her house with the thought of that she was going to have animals and that she was going to be trekking in and out from the garden. So she wanted something that she could easily clean. And so she's decided to clean with a leaf blower. How do these pictures of what the inside looks like translate to the outside? We've got the minimalistic that, has very repeated shapes with very little adds to it. There's one tree in there and the rest of it is grass. It's very minimalistic. And some people really like the simpleness of a minimalistic yard or landscape. Maybe it's rustic. Here they use those flagstones and they're up under the trees there, and they've got that table that's kind of rustic looking, and they've got their chairs, and it's just a great place for them to be. Or maybe you're into the English cottage gardens, the ones that the flowers just kind of creep over and flow, and you have the vines that grow up on your house there or your buildings. Or maybe you're just looking for something where you can have comfort and conversation when you are with your friends and family. Maybe you're looking for some security. Maybe you're wanting to use some plants to keep people out. I know I sure wouldn't want to jump through that agave and that yucca there. There's other plants that you can use for security too. Maybe that's what you're looking for. Or maybe you're looking for that retreat, that seclusion where you can go and be by yourself and you can kind of rest and revive, where you can recharge. Or maybe you really love the beach and you want to bring the beach to your house. Or maybe you like the Asian flair and you want to go a little bit Oriental. So maybe this is Oriental chic that you want to do. You do you and figure out which one that you want to do. So when you're figuring out that, what is your picture when you look through the window? And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're actually looking out your window into it. But when you look into or through the window of your outside room, what do you see? What do you picture? What do you envision? What makes you happy? So one of the things that we see a whole lot on landscaping is foundation plantings. And to give you a little background on foundation plantings, 100 years ago, this is the way that homes were built. They were wood, and they were built up on columns or platforms because they were made of wood. And and if they put the wood on the ground, then it would rot. And so to keep it from rotting, they would put these homes on platforms. So they were kind of raised up. They were on a foundation, like these columns that you see here. My childhood home that I grew up on or in was built in the 1900s. And I remember crawling up under the porch just like that. And the chickens would be under there and they would have scratched out a place. And it was cool and refreshing. And it was awesome. But a lot of people don't like the gap that you see there. They wanted something to cover it up. And so therefore they did the foundation plantings. And today I think we use foundation plantings maybe a little more than what we should. So, if your house needs foundation planting, then use them. But if it doesn't, don't feel like you have to have foundation plantings whenever you're thinking about your landscape. So landscaping goes back to artistry. And you know, if you think of pictures that artists have created, they use lines and they use colors and they use textures, and um, they just blend it all together. And so if you look at this one's a very calming picture, and it has gentle waves to it. It's got lines, it's got proportion, or scale, and it all matches, and they just all goes together, and it's a very appealing type of picture. And that's what your landscape should be. It should be something that appeals to you. But now, I may like this painting, but you may not. You may like a totally different style of painting. But think about that. Think about the things that you like and what makes you happy when you're doing this, because you are the artist when it comes to your landscape. Think about nature when you're thinking about your landscape. On this one, we have that pond out there, and you've got the glossy surface, and it kind of meanders around and has curves there. Well, if you wanted to translate that into a landscape, then you could have like your ground cover in a circular kind of pattern that kind of reflects your pond or your lake there. And then you can bring in the other aspects. You know, you've got your low growing stuff, and then you've got your medium height, and then you've got some different height as far as your trees go, and it's just a very appealing picture. And so that's what you want. You want the picture to appeal to you when you do your landscape. And don't let anybody tell you that you have to follow all of the rhymes and reasons, or the laws. Like, you've got to plant 3 of everything if you're going to plant it, you know, or that you have to do this or you have to do that. You do you. You decide what you want to do. And sometimes you might just need to be a rule breaker. The first thing that we're going to talk about is line. Lines are straight, they can be curvy, they can be vertical, they can be horizontal. The straight lines tend to take your eye and they follow the path. They show you the way that you're going to go. And when they're straight, they tend to be formal in appearance. So you've got like this formal garden, and you can see the lines, and they're very neat and precise. And then you have the curved lines that just kind of meander along, and it tends to make you slow down. It tends to be a little bit more relaxing. And a lot of times there's a surprise just around the bend there. And then you have vertical lines, which is where it brings your eyes up and it gives height to your outdoor space. It opens up the space. You know, it gives you an appeal as you're looking at it. And then you have horizontal, and your horizontal are usually like your walls, and it's the ones that your eye follows along the ground. So in the bottom picture, we have the wood wall that goes up. So you've got your eye going up, and then you have the horizontal wall that's right there that gives it depth. So you've got height and you've got depth right there. And then in the picture that is in the top right hand corner, you've got a circular pattern there. You've got an angle. You've got a diagonal angle there. You've got some straight lines. And then you've got different heights. So you've got some height that brings your eye, and it just is very appealing in that landscape there. So line is very important. When it's probably the most important thing that you're going to think about. How do you want your landscape to feel? Do you want it to feel more formal, or do you want it to feel a little more informal? And that's where you get to decide which lines are great for you. And then you're going to look at forms, and forms are through tree forms and through shrubs and ground cover forms, but it's also in the ground covers that you use, or the ground materials, your hardscape materials that you use, and the way that you use them. So on tree form, we have the round, which can be found in red oaks and red maples and Ohio buckeyes. And then we have a columnar, which we can find in the Lombardy poplar. And then you've got oval, which can be like the paperbark birch or Kentucky coffee tree. You have the pyramidal tree shape, which can be like the bald cypress or the ginkgo biloba tree. And then you've got the vase shaped tree, which can be the golden rain tree, or even hackberry. Even though a lot of people don't like hackberry, they do have a vase shape to them. And you can have weeping, which can be like your weeping cherry or your weeping mulberry. So you can use trees to kind of have that form, that give definition within the landscape in different ways. And then your shrubs, they go from spreading and clumping and sprawling and short spikes and molding and matting and irregular and spiky and vase shaped and rounded and cascading and arched and upright. And they can all be used in different ways to create the living areas that you want in your landscape. And then I talked about the hardscapes, and the hardscapes can be like in squares, they can be in they can be in square shapes, they can be in rounded shapes, and then they can be in polygonal shapes. And the polygonal shapes can be like, this is kind of in a triangular pattern on this deck there, that it kind of goes together. It could be, if you're thinking about a gazebo that is a polygon, you know, that's a different shape, you know, but it gives it form as you're going through the landscape there. And then we come to color, and color is the pop. It's the thing that really draws the eye. A lot of times it's the focal point of the garden. And the color, you have the yellow, the red, and the blue, which are your primary colors. And then when you add red and yellow together, you get orange. And when you do yellow and blue, you get green. And when you do red and blue, you get your purple. And those are your secondary colors. And then once you add another color to those secondary colors, you get the tertiary colors. And you also have tints, which is when you add a white to a shade or to a color. And then you have shades when you add black to it. So if we take red, for example, if we add white to it and we get pink, that's a tint. And if we add black to red, then we get a maroon, and that's a shade of red. And so when we're looking at these, your red and oranges tend to be very warm, very vibrant, very energetic colors. So if you want your landscape to have lots of colors or energy to it, then you probably want to go to the colors kind of like the ones that are on the left here. But if you're wanting something that's a little bit more mellow, you want something that's a little bit more calming and refreshing, then you probably want to go kind of to the blue green aspect, which if you look at the picture that's on the right hand side at the top, it's a very relaxing color combination there. But you may want to be monochromatic, which means that you're staying in the same color family. So the one that's directly below the color wheel is actually a green monochromatic landscape there. It has different shades and varieties of greens, and that may be what you want. If you're going to do a pollinator garden and you want to do a moonflower, then you're going to have flowers that are shades of white or that have shades of white within them. And then maybe you want to have both warm and cool together, but you need something that brings in that harmony. And so in this one, the gray foliage here it separates it, but it also blends it together. So it forms unity in that picture at the bottom right. Then we're going to talk about texture. We have coarse, we have medium, and we have fine. And coarse textured are the ones that have like the big leaves that have serrations on them. And like when you look at them, you're like, ooh, it's going to feel coarse. It's going to feel kind of sandpapery maybe. Or it's got that, it's just got a look about it. And so a lot of times when we think of that in the landscape, we think of hollies and hydrangeas and like the river birch there that has that peeling bark that you see. The agave, the yucca are also coarse textured. But coarse textured can also be in the hardscape materials that we use, such as rough cut stones, unfinished woods that have knots in them. Those are all considered coarse textured. And then the majority of our things fall under the medium texture. And that means that they just kind of have a mounded or rounded shape to them. They don't have a lot of anything that makes them stick out. They're kind of smooth edged, and they're just kind of there. They don't necessarily jump out at you. And a lot of times these can be like your euonymus and your viburnums, your camellias. As far as the hardscape goes, it's like the flagstone pavers and the finished wood hardscape items that you see used. And then we come to fine textured. This is thin, strappy leaves with delicate leaves, tiny twigs. The examples for this is your grasses, your ferns, your Japanese maples. If you think of that frilly leaf that they have, they're considered a fine texture. Junipers with their very fine leaves or needles are considered to be fine textured. And then fine textured as far as hardscapes can be smooth stones, clay pots, glass ornaments. And then it can be like the smooth water. If you have like a gazing pond and it's got the smooth water, or if you have a water feature that has a fine mist that it puts out, that fine mist is considered to be a fine texture when you're thinking about the landscape. And then we need to think about scale. And scale is how something in the landscape compares to another item. So on the top row, I think all of these are good examples of scale in the landscape. In this one in the back, you've got some low growing plants, and then you've got some medium height plants, and it kind of all just kind of flows, for you to kind of look as it's going up. There's nothing that is just overpowering in this, and it all seems to go together. And you've got that tree in the foreground that kind of bring your eyes to the arbor that's in the background, and they're about the same height, and it just all seems to work. And then when you look at this house in the middle, um, they don't really have a whole lot of foundation plantings. They have a few low growing ones up there if you look at it, but you don't have anything that takes away from their home. Their landscaping showcases their home. And so if you look at the landscaping that they do and the scale that they have it in, it gradually increases and takes your eye just right up those stairs. And it's a nice blend of color and line and form and texture and scale. And if you look, there's not really anything that's blocking views or windows, or anything in this home. And then in this last home there, they actually took and potted, 2 ferns to give some more appeal, to give it a little more height. And then they put it at the base of the stairs there, and it's about the same height as the entrance to the stairs there. And so the scale of that is really nice, and that kind of gives it a formal look. And so you can get formal looks if you want that, or symmetrical looks, by putting plants in pots and not necessarily having to plant those things into the ground. And then in the bottom, I think these are some that represent maybe some scales that are just a little bit off. This first one on the left, I think it's just kind of helter skelter, it's just kind of all over the place. There's no rhyme or reason, when I'm looking at it, I don't know where to focus at on this. So I think the scale is off on that. It would, if it was plant to where you had low growing kind of at the front of it, and then it slowly reached up to the sky, it would be good. Or if it had some pattern to it, but it doesn't. And so to me, it's not very appealing as far as a landscape goes. And then this one in the middle, it has the tree that kind of blocks those two windows that are out there, and you could probably trim that one and it would probably be okay. And then they have the 2 hollies that are at the side, and I think they just kind of overpower. They take away from the beauty of the house, in my opinion. And then you have all those boxwoods that are there at the very front. And if you look at them, they're kind of different sizes and different shapes, and some of them don't look very good. And what's going to happen if one of those dies? I think just the scale of the use of the plants that they have right there could have been done just a little bit better. I think that maybe fewer foundational plants may have made this house, really stand out on this. And then in the very last one, this one has a lot of lollipop type things, and mushroom or meatball type plants, because they are very manicured. There's a lot of time and effort that has to go into this one. I think that the holly tree that's there at the corner of the house probably balances that. It kind of goes up, so I think that it's probably a fine one there. But then if you look at the way that they're put together, you've got some of the small ones, and then up here at the front you got one that's like a lot bigger than the other ones, and then you've got ones that are blocking the view of the windows, and then you have the crepe myrtle that is in the middle of the window there. And they have actually crepe murdered it, because they have taken it back down. And the reason they probably did that was because it probably got too big. It wasn't the right scale crepe myrtle for that place. And so, for them to keep it in check, they had to do this, which is just a shame. And I think that they could have really highlighted the beauty of this house if they had used, maybe like they've got the grass at the very front. If they had used the grass, and then maybe went to something that was just a little bit more and brought some color and pop to it. But I just think the scale is off on the plants that they used in that one. And so when you're looking at all of this, what you should do, you should go and drive around and find landscapes that you're like, and you're like, ooh, I like that. That looks really good. Or look and say, ooh, I don't like that. I don't want to do that. You should also visit the UT Gardens if you have a chance. We have one in Jackson, we have one in Crossville, and we have one in Knoxville. And they have lots of different plants that we have growing to see how well they do. Go and see how they've put things together and what combinations. Go to the botanical gardens that are around. Visit places. Look in magazines. Find ideas. Decide what you like and what you don't like. That's the biggest key whenever you're going to do your landscape designing here. So if we look at this house, it's a very pretty house, and it probably needs some foundation plantings, because it is kind of raised up there. It's got a space, between it and the ground. But I don't know that planting all these same plants is a good thing, because if one of them gets a disease, then they're probably all going to get a disease. And if you have to take 2 or 3 of those out, then you've got a big hole there, and how do you replace that? So I would say mix it up, put a couple of different plants there. It's kind of like if you're creating a screen, to keep your neighbors away or out of sight. You don't want to plant all the same things, because plants do tend to get diseases or insects. And if you have one hit them, then and they're all the same, they're liable to all be hit. And so if you have some variety and some separation, then you can kind of control that sometimes. So those are things to think about when you're doing this. And then, when you're thinking of landscape, you can think of it from the outside looking in, or you can look at it from the outside or from the inside looking out. So whichever way that you want to. So, if you wanted it to have great curb appeal, then, you look at it that way. But if you're looking at it from, the inside of the house, you may say, I don't particularly care for that, or I want something else. So you do you, and you design it the way that you want to. So the other thing is to work with what you have. A lot of times, we want things, and sometimes that's just not possible. Like this one, it's grown in a wooded area, and grass just does not grow in the shade that this area gets, but moss does. And so if you look at this has a beautiful carpet of moss. I mean, it just is like cushy looking, and it just very eye appealing, and they use the leaves that have naturally fallen kind of as their mulch, and they worked within their landscape to make it happy and for it to be a place that was pleasing to them. So work with what you have. And remember, all seasons matter. We tend to really focus on those summer plants that when we see all the color and enjoy it the most. But that's not the only time that you're going to be looking at your landscape. You're going to be looking at it in the spring. You're going to be looking at it in the fall. And you're going to be looking at it in the winter. So what is your view? What do you have out there that's kind of a focal point for you during the time when maybe you don't have as much color going on? So keep that in mind as you're planning these, is that focal points during the different seasons. So remember this, landscaping is about the user. It's what you want, what you desire, not necessarily what your neighbor has, or even the person across the street, or what some of your other family and friends may want. It's what you want. And so sometimes, you're asking yourself, okay, do I do it myself or do I hire a pro? Well, I guess it all just depends on if you are a DIYer, if you can do things that you're wanting done yourself. But sometimes the pro is just somebody that really knows what they're doing and the plants that they are using. And so if you've done your research and you've looked at things and you know what they need, you may be just as much of a pro as what they are. And again, designate the areas that you want to use and inventory the site. Remember to check your soil pH to know what kind of soil that you have. Know if you have water available, if it's a place that's away from the house. If you put something that needs a lot of water, are you going to be able to water it? Look at your slope, your site. Look at your sun. Because whenever you're looking at plants and everything, you'll see that they'll say that they're either a full sun plant, or they'll say they're part sun, part shade, or they'll say that they're, a shade plant. Full sun plant means that it gets 6 hours of direct sun, 6 to 8. And then part sun gets about 4 hours. And then anything less than 4 hours is considered shade. And, if you get dapple shade and it gets partial sun for part of the time, but it doesn't get the 6 hours, it's still part shade. So you need to be aware of all of that as you are designing your area. And then decide what your most important view is and start there. Because sometimes, we get grand ideas and we're like, oh, we want to do all of this. But sometimes money and time kind of limit what we can do. And so you need to decide what's the most important thing. If you can only do one, which one do you do? And that's where you start. And remember, you are the artist that's in charge of your view. You can get somebody to come in and you can say, design me whatever. But for them to be able to design it for you, they need to know about you. They need to know what your wants are, what your desires, what type of things that you like. Are you minimalistic or are you eclectic? Those are all important considerations whenever you think about your view there. And then remember that your needs and priorities can change over time. If you're starting out and you're young, then your needs may be different than somebody that is now an empty nester. So remember that needs and priorities and the way that you're going to use your landscape may be different. And it's okay for those things to change. And you should design it to accommodate change, because you don't want to have it to where you're like, oh, I would love this, but I can't because, X, Y, and Z. Design it to accommodate the change that's going to come in your life. And then plan for obsolescence. And obsolescence means that it's just going to become obsolete. It's no longer going to be the newest, brightest, best thing. For example, in the 90s, Nandina was used in everything. I mean, it's like the most common used landscape plant. But then, as the years have gone on, it's kind of become obsolete. It's not as high up on that, oh, it's the greatest, neatest, best thing ever. So plan on that, and as you're going along, maybe you want to change. Maybe you're like, hey, I'm tired of this. It's out of date. I've got to change. And here's the key to it all. Every great garden has been in the wheelbarrow 3 times. And that just means that sometimes you plant something once and then you're like, that's not where that needs to go, or it's not happy there, or we need to do something different, and you have to dig it up and move it again. And so don't be scared to move those plants to where they need to be. All right, that is the end of my presentation. So if y'all have any questions, feel free to ask them now or send them in the chat. And I hope that you learned a little bit about landscape design. Thank you for that. It's kind of hard to talk landscape design in an hour because it has so many different little spots that you could spend a whole lot of things that you can talk about. When I pulled from Carol's PowerPoint, I think she had like 350 something slides that she had for a landscape design presentation that she had. So there's a whole lot there. All right, so you have a lot of laurels in the front. Well, laurels are kind of big there. And so you could get something that, and I'm going to say that laurels are probably, they've got the green sheen to them on the leaves. If you wanted to put some interest in there, you could do some of the grasses that have some interest there, that give you a little bit of height. And you can kind of scale it down, and then you could put in some annuals in front of it to give it a little more color. One of the great things, if you use bulbs, you can take Iris now has some variegated leaf that they have. They still have the beautiful flowers, but the flowers only last a couple of weeks there, but they have some green and yellow variegated leaves, and they would be an upright that would kind of come into that. Or you could get some grasses. You could I'm trying to think of things that add some pop there, and really, for me to answer that question, I guess we kind of have to know what your style is, what you like. What do you find appealing? But I think you can find anything that kind of, without having to remove the laurels there, I think you can find you lots of plants that you kind of mix and match and create what you could do the mounding, with the color there, and as you have those mounding, and then you could go into the creeping. So, if you go back to looking at the forms, you can kind of do some of those forms that kind of go together and create a beautiful landscape right there. And I will tell y'all should go to the uthort.com, and when you get there, that has like the site for all of our horticultural publications. But if you go in there and you type in bulb, you'll find a publication that talks about all the bulbs that are recommended for Tennessee, and it tells you like when they bloom, and it gives you ideas of colors. And they also have, if you put annual in, they have a publication about annuals and what they look like and what they need. There's also one on perennials. We also have publications on shrubs and trees. So y'all should go and check that site out, and it'll give you a lot of ideas for you to think about. Hey, what about this? And it'll kind of tell you, on some of them, I think it actually kind of tells you the form that it takes also. Any more questions? And I'm sorry if I didn't give you, like specific answers for that. But again, it has to do with, what you like and enjoy. All right. Well, if there are no other questions, I'm going to end this presentation, and I will send out a copy of this once I get it uploaded into our format and everything. So y'all have a great rest of the week, and you're welcome. I hope that y'all enjoyed the presentations that we did. We tried to get a variety that would meet a lot of people's needs on that. So thank y'all for attending. We really appreciate it. All right, we'll see y'all later.